Well, according to the New Zealand Herald this morning, the coalition government has possibly backtracked on their policy around transgender players in sports. New Zealand First was very firm that you should stick to your biological sex for purposes of safety and fairness. But the New Zealand Herald says there's been a backtrack, and today we speak to Ro Edge from Save Women's Sports Australasia. Hello, Ro. Always good to have you on the program. I guess it's been a busy day for you.
It has, and it started very early, 5:15 with Mike Hosking this morning. It's a bit of a shock to my system, but anyway, good to be able to talk about it and to try and work out what's going on.
Yeah, look, just for our viewers, just in a nutshell, Reader's Digest version, tell us about Save Women's Sports Australasia.
Okay, so we were formed nearly 5 years ago to protect the female category in sport because we saw at that time that the IOC had changed their policy to allow males to compete in the female category if they'd simply reduce their testosterone, even though there was no evidence to show that testosterone reduction mitigated male advantage. There's now over 40 studies that show that it doesn't. But yet we still have sports with policies that allow this. But we could see that it was opening the door and going to create a massive problem. And the problem has grown and grown and grown. And just like your own polling has shown, Bob, the more people see it, the less they like it. 5 years ago, it wasn't a big deal and people were telling us, just be kind. There's so few. But now there are so many that actually people are getting rather annoyed.
Okay, well, actually, let's just have a look at that polling. And there it is. The little figures down the bottom is actually 5 years ago, 2018, 6 years ago, where it was actually even Stevens. People couldn't quite see that there was an issue. And yet now, just massive opposition to allowing boys playing in girls' sports. Why do you think that change has come around, Ro?
Because we're seeing this happen at every level of sport, whether it's 12-year-old girls' cricket tournaments and boys playing who identify as girls, whether it's males being in the changing rooms at swimming pools, like at community swimming pools. We've got male cyclists that have all the female trophies for their cycling club. It's just happening everywhere, and it's across all sports and all age groups now.
Right. Okay, and so the argument is that it's only professional sports that should be worried about it, but actually it's at junior level. In fact, my understanding is that the AIMS sports event that happens in a couple of months and has massive attendance from children, their policy is that it's how you identify, not biological sex, which I think shocks a few parents when you tell them.
And I think what's really important for people to understand is that when they talk about trans women, and we call them males who identify as transgender because they're not women, you cannot change sex. But when we talk about that, we are talking about men, most of whom have not had any surgery or any medical treatment whatsoever. It's complete self-ID. And when you're talking about younger boys and teenage boys, the most they've had is some puberty blockers. That's it. So there's male advantage begins in the womb. There are sporting records from age 5 upwards that show that, if females didn't have separate competitions, we would never achieve anything.
Okay, let's look at the two responses, because I think there is a difference how National responded to this story and how New Zealand First has responded, which interestingly hasn't been reported, but that's part of the story. So National's response is Chris Bishop, the Minister of Sport, who said, and I heard Nicola Willis, the Deputy Leader who was sitting in for the Prime Minister on her morning chat with Mike Hosking on News Talk ZB, saying that basically there wasn't much evidence of this being a problem, so they would do some watchful waiting. And I use watchful waiting in a kind of ironic way because I wish they'd do watchful waiting in the whole gender ideology. But what do you think of the response that Chris Bishop has given?
Well, look, it's really poor. First of all, I think he's been given really bad advice from his officials. And I do wonder if, they've got government bureaucrats trying to create problems for this coalition government, because Chris Bishop was wrongly told that the guidelines had exemptions for fairness and safety for female athletes. There are no exemptions in there. In fact, what they do is they actually threaten disciplinary action if people raise concerns. So it's quite the opposite. And, when they say they want this watchful waiting to see, what arises, well, everyone's too scared to speak out. So you're not going to hear from any female athletes because they're being told straight away that, sports have these like a zero tolerance to discrimination, harassment and bullying. And that covers basically if you cause harm to somebody, either directly or indirectly. So if you're a female and you go to your sports organisation and say, look, I'm really not happy about playing against or with males in my sport, and that could cause harm indirectly to that transgender player. So, no, it's really disappointing, but it just shows the ignorance there is from politicians on this. And is that willful ignorance? I don't know, but it's very disappointing.
Okay, so in effect, you're saying that the Minister of Sport, Chris Bishop, is misrepresenting the actual guidelines?
Yes, he hasn't read them. It's quite obvious. You'll find nowhere in there that it talks about anything to do with fairness and safety for female athletes. In fact, it was actually amazing. The entire set of guidelines doesn't mention anywhere the feelings, the fairness and safety for female athletes, even though it is only female sport that is impacted by these guidelines.
Okay, and what about the claim, which I also heard the Deputy Leader Nicola Willis refer to, that, look, they haven't heard of complaints, this isn't really an issue?
Well, that's bollocks. I mean, we have sent examples to them. I don't know how I can put it any nicer, but the examples are limited just simply because I had an email from a lady this morning involved in cycling, and she's withdrawn from her cycling club because of a male transgender participating in there, but she's still too scared to speak out.
Yeah,
this is the problem we have. How do we win this battle if everybody is fearful? And what I want to get across is you shouldn't be fearful. The majority of people agree.
Okay, and I mean, I've heard examples as well. I had a friend who was coaching a girls' soccer team in a high school, and they played another team, and the centre back was clearly not a biological girl, who was cleaning up everybody that came through, and yet nobody sort of thought that was unfair. The transgender female.
And it's going from stupid to ridiculous now too, because initially it was just males who identified as women were allowed to participate in women's sport, but there's new terms being coined now. Roller derby has gender expansive, which means that anyone can participate in female sport. And there was a tournament in Adelaide that a New Zealand team went over and played last week over there, and there was at least 3, if not more, males participating, and they were just full-on males. Aggressive males that were actually enjoying dominating females in a sport where there's a lot of physical contact. I mean, it's like bull rush on wheels, right?
And I think I've seen the women's soccer team in Australia that's cleaning up a lot of teams because they've got 5 biological dudes on the women's team, and teams are pulling out because they want to protect their girls. Okay, let's look at New Zealand First's response, because they're a bit unhappy about this whole media coverage. I think they're arguing it's a hit job, which wouldn't surprise me, to be honest, but let's have a look at what Winston Peters said. He said he agrees with fairness and safety. He says that a few woke journalists might want to think their interpretation holds weight. Newsflash, they don't. Our government isn't backing down on anything, not least of which is our stance on fairness and safety of women in sport. What's your response to that?
I mean, it was great to see him come out with that, because I think he avoided being interviewed on News Talk ZB this morning.
Yeah, about something weird.
Yeah, I think they were like trying to work out what was going on here, because I honestly don't think they knew this was coming. So, good to see, but I think what we need from Winston is some definitive statements. Are the Sport New Zealand guiding principles going to be removed? I'm not worried if they don't fund sports. At the end of the day, stop funding. All I want is those guidelines to be removed, because the problem we have now is we talk to different sporting bodies, and even if their international federation has protected the female category, they don't believe they can at New Zealand level because of Sport New Zealand's guidelines. Sport New Zealand is their funders. They hold the levers. If they don't comply, they're worried that they will miss out on valuable funding.
Right. Okay, how much of the problem is this person, our friend Raylene Castle? And the reason I've got this image is because during the Israel Folau debacle, she was asked what parts of the Bible could Israel quote, and she said just the good bits. But Raylene Castle has come from Australia. She's now in charge of, what's it called? Sport New Zealand. And I mean, she's pushed a very strong liberal approach to this so-called inclusive but not safe and fair. How much of it is, do you think, she's in the ear of the National Party and not talking to the New Zealand First Party?
Oh, quite a lot, actually. I mean, her and Robertson were they were the ones that implemented the guidelines. Yeah, Grant Robertson in the first place. It's like her baby, and she's going to cling to it come hell or high water. I don't understand it. Is it because she's not a mother and she doesn't have daughters? I don't know. But she seems to be prioritising the feelings of males over the feelings, fairness, safety and opportunity of half the population, and it's not on.
Okay, so where to from here, Ro?
Oh, I don't know. It's been a hectic morning. In a way, this could backfire on the journalists and on Sport New Zealand, because I think people are going to get really, really angry about it, and it might bring it to a head. We've been frustrated that we haven't been able to get any action on this since the new government came in, and we've just been sort of pushed aside and ignored. This might bring it to a head now. This could actually work in our favour. So I'm going to keep positive. That's the line I want to take. But we need as many people as possible to speak out. Email Chris Bishop. Let him know what your thoughts are. If you've got any examples, let him know. Even if you can't name people, it's really important that they see that this is an issue, and that they can't say that they're not seeing any examples of it, because it's just so not true. And the ridiculous thing about it is too, why are we opening up the female category before we know it's fair and safe, rather than protecting it until we know that no one's going to be disadvantaged? But we've done everything the wrong way around here.
Yeah. And I think, huge opposition, as the polling shows. Only about 13% think that this is a good idea. The overwhelming majority. So you're right. We need to get our voice and need to tell Chris Bishop there are plenty of examples. Do you think New Zealand First have just been blindsided by this? Is this a media hit job, do you think?
I do, actually. At first I wasn't sure, and I was pretty angry last night when I was sent the embargoed press release. But the more that I've talked to them, I had a good chat with Tanya Ankovic, and while she couldn't say much,
First MP,
I generally feel that this is a hit job on them. I think this is
how much of this is the right? How much of this is the media are undermining the government, but how much of this is a clash of the social conservatives in New Zealand First and socially liberal in Chris Bishop and Nicola Willis and the National Party in general?
Well, that is a big problem, because unfortunately Chris Bishop and Nicola Willis represent woke Wellington. They don't represent the majority of Kiwis, and they're trying to cater to their voter base. But it's not reflective of New Zealanders. And if they looked at any of the polling, yours or ours, they would see that their voters don't support this.
Okay, doing a great job, Ro. What's the website for people to find out more about Save Women's Sport Australasia?
Yep, savewomensport.com. Nice and easy.
Or savewomensport.com. And we all know what a woman is, don't we? Okay.
We sure do. So glad you
Thank you, Ro. Nice to talk to you.
Yeah, lovely chatting too. Bye.